So, Thanksgiving weekend, 1981, this is where things take a tragic turn. Natalie Wagner, the yacht captain, Dennis DeVerne, and actor Christopher Walken take a trip to Catalina Island. Walken was Natalie's co-star at the time in the movie Brainstorm. The vibe? Tense, allegedly. Wagner was jealous of Walken, and there was drinking, fighting, and then Natalie disappears. Hours later, Natalie's body is found floating in the water. She's wearing a nightgown, a jacket, and socks. A dinghy is found beached nearby. Her face and body show bruises and abrasions, and at first her death is ruled an accident. The story is that she tried to board the dinghy and slipped. Years later, the case is reopened. The yacht's captain goes public, saying he heard a huge fight and believes Wagner was involved. Wagner allegedly delayed calling for help, and in 2012, her cause of death is officially changed to drowning and other undetermined factors. In 2018, Wagner is named a person of interest. So, where are we now? Natalie's death is still to this day unsolved. Walken has barely spoken about it. Wagner denies any wrongdoing, but the fortune teller's warning, dying in dark water, ended up being true. It is chilling, it's sad, and it's very Taurus moon in the 8th house. After the break, we're looking at Natalie's birth chart, how her Cancer sun, Taurus moon, and Libra rising played into her public persona, private fears, and romantic partners. And yes, we'll also look at the transits the night she died, so stay tuned. Welcome back, starlets. Now that we've talked about Natalie Wood's tragic death, let's get into her birth chart. And if the stars were any indication that this could happen. So first, Natalie was born July 20th, 1938 at 11:16 a.m. in San Francisco, California. She is a Cancer sun, Taurus moon, and Libra rising, and I have her chart pulled up right here. So first, let's start with the big three. And if you don't know what the big three is, it is our sun sign, our moon sign, and our rising sign. The sun sign in astrology is about our identity, and it is who we are becoming. The moon is our emotions and feelings, and it's how we nurture ourselves. The rising sign is how we move through life. It's the flavor, the genre, it's the energy that we meet every day. Natalie Wood was a Cancer sun, and her sun sits in her 10th house, the house of public life, reputation, and career. That's someone whose emotional depth becomes part of their brand. The public saw her perhaps as vulnerable but nurturing, soft, very maternal. That is Cancer energy. But it wasn't an act. That was her. She could not separate who she was from how she was perceived. Cancer's suns are all about family and tradition. The sun is where we shine. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and it's not necessarily the zodiac sign that enjoys attention or being figured out or being seen. So when we have a Cancer sun, a part of our past or our family experience, trauma, whatever, is exposed. This is especially true for Natalie because her sun is sitting in her 10th house of public recognition. It's the top of the birth chart, and it's extremely exposed. So we know that she did carry some family trauma, and she was pushed into the spotlight by a mother who was absolutely obsessed with fame. Her rising sign, she is a Libra rising, which made her graceful, well-liked, magnetic, but conflict avoidant. Libra risings tend to get along with most people, and they just want to keep the peace. So because this is her rising sign, that's really how she showed up every day, just wanting to get along and make sure that everyone was understood. Her Taurus moon in the 8th house, this is what really got me. The 8th house rules death, secrets, power, fear, transformation, and it is associated with deep water, loss, trauma, and psychological entanglement. Now, before I scare you and you all go running to look at your birth charts, I have this placement. So if I'm not scared of it, you can't be either. The 8th house is like the haunted house in the birth chart, and it is where we go deep. It is where we, for the first time in the birth chart, are being asked really to look at ourselves, to do some deep work and to get comfortable with our psyche. It's where we see things like therapy and healing. And sure, some trauma and death-related topics. The 8th house is where we see fear, especially when we're younger, because kids don't usually want to go in the haunted house, right? They're not ready to really visit that part of life. But eventually, if we have placements in the 8th house, we learn that it is better to show up here than to avoid it. And so that does look like, why I'm interested in astrology and going a little bit deeper, because I understand that there is more out there. But if we ignore the 8th house, it can absolutely kind of turbulent, especially if the moon is there, because the moon is the most emotional planet. It is highs and lows and gains and loss. It controls the ocean tides, right? So think of the moon like a wave. And wherever the moon lives in all of our charts, that is an area that is getting a bit rocky. It's like emotions. We are meant to experience all the highs and all the lows. The point of the moon is to learn to surrender and to learn to ride the wave. And so with the moon in the 8th house, from the moment Natalie was born, she was really being asked to get comfortable with her inner well-being, her psyche and her emotions and her fears, which we knew one of her fears growing up was water. When you put the moon in the 8th house, the part of the chart that governs emotions, fears, inner safety, you do get someone who feels things so deeply, and it can be unbearable. We can also see people who cling to love, even when it's dangerous, someone who fears being abandoned more than anything. People with this placement often feel like something bad is always just around the corner. And let's be real, death is around the corner for all of us. So the 8th house is very aware of that. And so they're very hyper vigilant of their surroundings. And oftentimes it shows up as anxiety or fear. Natalie was terrified of drowning. Her chart validates that fear, and it does make it feel a bit faded. Now, with that to say, having the moon in the 8th house, it absolutely does not always mean tragic death or drowning. However, it can represent a fascination or a fear around death-related topics. But again, the 8th house is a very watery house, and the moon is a watery planet. Okay, so let's look at the stars on the night that Natalie died, November 28th, 1981. First of all, the sun was sitting right next to both Mercury and Uranus. That is big, shocking revelation energy. Mercury rules communication. Uranus rules disruption and plot twists and shocking news. It's giving heated words, things said that can't be taken back. People often feel impulsive under this, like they have to speak their truth, even if it causes chaos. There's this rebellious, unpredictable edge when Uranus is involved. The moon was also squaring Mars, which is emotional tension turned all the way up. Mood swings, impulsive reactions, emotional confrontations. At the same time, however, the moon was making a sextile to Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto. So we're talking emotional depth, vulnerability, and even like spiritual longing. The moon was conjunct Neptune, the planet of illusion and water, literal water, the ocean, the unknown. It's eerie how strongly the emotional and water symbolism shows up. Like something below the surface was rising up, literally and metaphorically. Also, Venus was in a major clash. It was squaring Saturn and Pluto. And Venus, Saturn is like love and fear colliding. It can bring feelings of rejection, coldness, or like we're withholding affection. And Venus, Pluto, that is emotional obsession, control, power plays. It's magnetic, it's passionate, but also very potentially toxic. And Pluto also rules death. And here's the kicker. Venus was also trining Mars. So yeah, the chemistry, the tension, it was all there. It's giving lovers quarrel that turns into a deeper crisis.